Finch-Saunders.
Thank you, Chloe, and thank you to the Cabinet Secretary. I know we have met and we have had conversations on these proposals going forward, and I have to say that I'm certainly very supportive of a lot. There's a lot of ambition here, and of course with ambition and legislation and making it sort of deliverable comes resource, and I feel that you will have resource implications, but I don't think anyone could actually knock the vision that you seek to move forward with. Obviously, I'll start off, I'll go through the threads really. The reform of town and community councils can't come quick enough. This is a level of democracy that does cost our taxpayer and should be transparent and accountable, and should actually have deliverable outcomes. And I regrettably, on numerous occasions, I've received complaints and concerns from residents regarding the openness and transparency at that level. And I'm aware that the members on the board, of course, are former AMs, Gwenda Thomas, Roderick Lynn Thomas, and of course we have William Graham. So I think those are three sort of people who I have every confidence in going forward. Uncontested seats are a problem, not just in town council seats, but also in principal authorities. There were 92 local authorities, principal authorities candidates that actually just went in without contest on the last local government elections, and I know that this was raised numerous times in Aberconway as to why people were turning up to vote and weren't aware that no election was going forward because somebody had just walked into a council seat. So your main overall aims is about accessibility, allowing people a better opportunity to vote, but I think also too we do need to be mindful that people do need candidates that they are then able to vote for. So that's something that maybe we can work on going forward. The consultation on the potential reform of the local government electoral system is interesting, and again it's all about opening up and engaging, improving accessibility to increase voter turnout at local government elections. Who could argue with that? And I do endorse a number of the proposals outlined. We do need to increase flexibility to enable council employees to stand for election as councillors. I know of a situation, and I've raised this with the Cabinet Secretary, of somebody who did a 4-hour-a-week contract and was unable to actually go forward standing as a council candidate. And I think clearly that there would only be a conflict of interest once that person was elected, if elected. So we need to look at that. We need to simplify postal voting. I'm sure other members, even with assembly elections or parliamentary, the postal voting system, probably across the UK, but I know in Wales, is very confusing for the elderly when they have to put it in different envelopes and, their signatures and everything. And I've witnessed so many spoilt ballot papers when people think that they voted correctly. So, so I'd like to ask the Cabinet Secretary, you do intend to put more meat on the bone where that's concerned. Proxy voting is another one. It's a method of people being able to vote when they're not actually present on that day. And I know that your plans for electronic voting and having the single electoral register is a good idea. But nonetheless, there is that mechanism currently there called proxy voting. And I know whenever I've suggested to people, not about postal voting, about proxy voting, they have looked at me in some disbelief, not understanding what proxy voting is. I'm not sure the actual word proxy is the best way to describe it. So if you could look to simplifying that process, it's another mechanism to get people over that line if they want to vote. I note your proposal for authorities to choose between the electoral systems, first past the post or single transferable vote. I just wonder about whether there could be some confusion across the boundaries. And are you actually looking at doing this on a local authority basis, individual basis, or is this going to be uniform across Wales? What consideration, moving on to directly elected mayors, which I've already made it clear that I'm quite in favour of, in terms of a local authority, not on the regional working basis. In England, it is 10% requirement for the referendum. it's the other way around, 5% in England, 10% here in Wales. And I think, again, if that's a way perhaps that we could look at bringing that threshold down so that, local authorities or people, the community within local authority areas can actually maybe go out and it's a better figure to go for, isn't it, 5%. I've raised this with you before. Remuneration for councillors across the border is on average around half that of Wales. Councillors representing more than twice the number of constituents. An example, England, an average of 6,893, and they have to represent 8,959. In Wales, they can be on 13,300, and their average is 3,300. So we do need to actually look at providing value for our constituents and electorate, and there's a balance there that needs addressing. Now, reform of principal councils. Certainly I agree and welcome joint working on back office functions. There's much good practice, and I discovered some myself only last week. 5 Somerset district councils share a central call centre for enquiries and payments. And if it can be done over the border, it can be done here. But of course, because I've held this portfolio for quite some time, I'm aware of all the guidance and everything to do with the collaboration agenda, and that was a failed programme for this Welsh Government. So I'd really be interested in knowing what methods, the stick, the carrot, or a bit of both, that you're going to use that will actually ensure that there is better working together. I do not see it feasible that we are going to still continue to have 22 chief executives, 22 heads of finance, 22 head of social services. I welcome the integration of health and social care, and there is a model here that you've mentioned in your statement, and that should be rolled out, I think, across Wales. You mentioned flexibility below the 3 main region joint governance committees. The North Wales Health Board, for instance, has often been described as unwieldy and too large. And we have a health board there now in special measures. So if you're looking to model local government on that basis, then there's more work to be done there. Cabinet Secretary, you have my support and that of my group for a lot of this going forward. We will look for the finer detail, and we will scrutinise and challenge where we feel that it may become overburdensome, confusing for the electorate and more costly. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr, Llywelyn, and thank you to Janet Finch-Saunders both for what she said this afternoon, but also for her willingness to engage in regular dialogue about some of these proposals, and for the constructive ideas that she's already contributed to it. I hope she will see in some of the things we are proposing in relation to town and community councils a reflection of some of her own direct experience, and I particularly wanted to thank her for her help in securing the services of William Graham as part of the review team. I agree with her very much that uncontested seats are something we would want to see eliminated in our democracy, both at a principal council level, but it is a particular feature of town and community councils. And those who operate in that sphere, and who I think often do very good work, they are themselves very aware of the fact that it's a vulnerability when we refer to it as a democratic tier, when so often there is so little democracy involved in the way that people end up as town and community councillors. Thank Janet Finch-Saunders for what she said about the proposals on the electoral system. I think this is a very exciting time for us in Wales. These will be new powers that we will inherit. The consultation paper is a mixture of a small number of propositions where we say the Welsh Government is pretty committed to taking ideas forward, such as extending the franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds, and then a much wider range of ideas where we are interested to hear what people have to say. The Speaker drew attention to the question we raised in the consultation about whether we draw the line in the right place between people who work for a council and are able to stand for a council. I don't think there's any doubt that at one end of the spectrum, very senior staff who are in politically restricted posts, they should not be allowed to stand for election. But at the moment, we prohibit, as Janet Finch-Saunders said, somebody working for a very small number of hours from standing for election. That prohibition falls disproportionately on women, and we ask the question as to whether or not we could draw the line in a different place. An All Wales electronic register would mean that the need for proxy voting would be reduced, but it wouldn't eliminate it, because if people go on holiday in England or called away to work in England, for example, you'd still need proxy voting, and we will look at the point that she makes about the potentially confusing terminology. Our proposals on permissive PR in local government are exactly that. It would be a choice for local government themselves to make. The threshold for a referendum on elected mayors, we don't intend to change the availability of a referendum in local areas where there is a call for an elected mayor. And again, as part of the consultation, I'm very willing that we will look at the threshold issue that the member has highlighted. I probably don't share her view entirely on the number of councillors we have in Wales. I think that the number is broadly the right one. The councillors that I see work very hard and have large numbers of voters to represent. The electoral reviews have started in Ceredigion, Conwy, Gwynedd and Powys. We expect it over the term to result in a modest reduction in the number of councillors in Wales. The proposals for Conwy Council, for example, propose a reduction of just over 10% in the number of councillors that would be available for that local authority. Finally, to respond to the points made about the reform of principal councils. I think the difference in the proposals that you see in front of the Assembly this afternoon is that they are both the product of hard work to try and craft a consensus with local authorities, but also a determination that when we have an agreed way forward on regional working, on frameworks, on footprints, on functions, then we will make that mandatory. Once we've agreed, then we need the force of the legislation under that agreement so that everybody is clear that if you've got round the table, you've agreed to discharge a function, there is no escaping from that agreement. I think that's in the interest of local authorities. Too many local authorities have told me of examples where they have worked very hard, put a lot of investment into a regional arrangement, only for one of the partners to walk away from the table at the last minute, and a lot of work to unravel very quickly. That can't be the future for local authorities in Wales. Llywydd, regional working is the way of the future, systematic, mandatory, but agreed.